According to a report in the Associated Press, the company that owns the National Enquirer offered to pay a former doorman $30,000 for a story about a possible Donald Trump love child. You're watching What's Trending. I'm Martine Bierman. Make sure to subscribe for more social media and news stories daily. The story goes that Dino Sajudin, a former doorman at one of Trump's buildings in New York City, heard a rumor about the then presidential candidate having fathered a child outside of marriage with an employee in the late 1980s. He brought this information to several news publications early in the 2016 presidential campaign. Ultimately, the National Enquirer agreed to pay Sajudin $30,000 for the rights to his story, but determined it was not credible and declined to publish it. Trump made his living as a tabloid playboy, so during that time, had the story come out, probably wouldn't have bothered him. He might have even liked the attention. A lot of things in his personal life were changing, and he was pretty public about all that stuff, and it didn't really seem like he cared. And at that point, he wasn't president of the United States. As first reported by Radar Online, Sajudin was to be paid $30,000 when the story was published. When he requested an advance, they agreed to pay him $500 upon completion of a lie detector test, which he took and passed. Radar published an internal Enquirer memo from November of 2015 detailing the identity of the woman with whom Trump supposedly had an affair and that of her daughter, the quote-unquote love child who would now be around 30 years old. That woman, whose name we're not going to be revealing, lives and works in Northern California. And interestingly enough, she's shared her genetic history publicly, and it's not as Scots-German as you'd expect if she was really Trump's child. Radar Online made it really easy to find out who she is, and we hope that her anonymity can be maintained while she makes it through this media circus. And for what it's worth, the National Enquirer ultimately determined that the story wasn't true. But can you imagine once people actually do find out who she is, because of course there's always detectives online, getting that phone call that's like, "You must be Trump's daughter." I cannot even imagine the type of day she must have had after that moment. Makes you really rethink your mom in that moment. And then when you find it's not true, you can finally stop holding your breath. I can go out in public again. Enquirer editor-in-chief Dylan Howard said, "When we realized we would be unable to publish and other media outlets approached the source about his tale, we released Sajudin from the exclusivity clause that had accompanied his $30,000 payment, freeing him to tell his story to whomever he wanted." The reality is that not all of this big news is actually based on the truth of the rumor, but because of other payments made to sources to keep quiet about stories that could be damaging to Trump. Payouts to former Playboy model Karen McDougal by the Enquirer and adult film star Stormy Daniels by Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen have dominated the news cycle in recent months. Cohen admitted that he had made a payment of $130,000 to Stormy Daniels to not publicly speak about her affair with Trump, though the president himself denied knowledge of this payment. But even if Trump didn't know about the payment, if it was made on behalf of his campaign, it could constitute a violation of campaign finance laws. And America Media Inc., the company that owns the National Enquirer, has been accused of frequently purchasing stories that would be damaging to Trump and intentionally not running them, a strategy known as catch and kill. But Dylan Howard, the editor of the Enquirer, denied that the doorman story was an example of a catch and kill. He said, "The public seems to think that this is another example of how the Enquirer, by supposedly catching and killing stories about President Trump, is a threat to national security. We're flattered by this attention and wish that it were true. Unfortunately, however, Dino Sajudin is one fish that swam away." This story is less about Trump's personal life because, well, there's lots of stuff out there about Trump's personal life, a lot of stuff that he put out there intentionally and was okay with being out in the public. But what is more concerning here is how much money is being thrown around to potentially squash damaging information and damaging stories by news media outlets in order to save face for the president. It just asked the question about the authenticity and the honesty of media outlets today, and it's kind of a sad realization, which I know has been happening for years, but now it's like right in our faces. But since we're not in the president's pocket, we can talk about it all, and so can you. Guys, make sure that you sound off in the comments because I will be there commenting on your comments. And for more trends, head to whatstrending.com.